Hello friends, in today's video we're going to be exploring Elasticsearch, how we can integrate it with our .NET Web API, and how we can actually utilize it to create a simple CRUD operation with it. If you'd like to learn more about .NET, Azure, and AWS, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now, let's jump into the code. So what I currently have here is a very simple web API. It's basically out of the box implementation with a weather controller. And I have here an empty Docker compose file that I'm going to be using in order for me to initialize Elasticsearch. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trying to run Elasticsearch locally on our machine. And we're going to be connected to it through our web API so we can use it for our CRUD operation. So let's get started. So first of all, I need to make sure that Docker is running with Docker. And now on the right here you can see Docker is running and it's actually working properly. Perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to actually initialize my services inside my Docker compose in order for me to tap into Docker and basically have Elasticsearch available locally. So what I'm going to have here, I'm going to have two different services. So I'm going to have Elasticsearch, which is going to be the engine that I'm going to be using. And I'm going to have Kibana, which is going to sit on top of Elasticsearch in order for me to be able to see the indices as well as to interact with my Elasticsearch indices. So I'm going to be initializing the two services right now through Docker Compose in order for me to have a visual representation about my Elasticsearch node. So let's get started. So what I have here is my Docker Compose file. I'm going to start first by adding the version for it, and we're going to be utilizing version 3.8. Next, I'm going to start by specifying the services, and the first service that I want to do, and as we can see here that I have GitHub Copilot already tried to implement it all for me. So let's see how that will do. So I'm just going to utilize what GitHub Copilot have suggested, and I'm going to modifying it based or if there is any need for it. So as we can see here, I have Elasticsearch, which is the first service. I specified my container name, which is going to be ELS. And I defined an image here, which is going to be Elasticsearch 8.15.0. And then what I did here, I specified the ports. And within these ports, I'm going to be connecting to port 9002, 200. As well, I have specified my volumes where all of the data for my Elasticsearch will be stored. Then we have here the environment, which is all going to be feeding into the container. For my Elasticsearch node, we can see that I have my discovery type as a single node because I only have one locally. As well, I have disabled some of the security implementation because again, it's running locally. And lastly, I have my network, which is going to be on the same network that Kibana is going to run. So both of them will be able to communicate. As for Kibana, I have here my container name, which is going to be Kibana. I have the image, which is going to be the same number versioning as my Elasticsearch, 8.15. Specified the port for Kibana, which is going to be 5601. This is the default port for both of them. So this is the 5601 for the default port for Kibana, and the default port for Elasticsearch is 9200. Then this is really important. I said that it depends on Elasticsearch. So it means that Kibana cannot run until Elasticsearch has fully been downloaded and run locally. And here I defined the environment where Kibana will be able to connect to Elasticsearch. And lastly, I have defined the network. So all of this seems to be fine. The last two items that I would like to add here, which is going to be my networks. And within my network, I'm just going to say that I'm going to be utilizing ELK as a driver, as a bridge. So basically, this will allow my two services to see each other and communicate with each other. Let's fix here the indentation. And the last thing that I want to specify here is the volumes. And the volumes is going to be my Elasticsearch volume, which is going to be called Elasticsearch data. So I'm just going to copy this one and I'm going to add it here under my volumes. And that should be it. This will allow me to have a fully fledged Elasticsearch as well as Kibana running on my machine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my terminal. So now what I want to do is I want to run my Docker Compose. I'm going to put Docker dash compose up. And now this what's happened basically is going to download my Elasticsearch and Kibana locally. And as we can see here that my version is for my Docker Compose is obsolete. That should be fine. I'm only running it locally on my machine. I'm not really taking this to any production, and this is only for a demo purposes. So I can basically remove this later on. But for now, we have to wait until both Elasticsearch and Kibana has been pulled down on my machine, and then we'll be able to see them running and we'll be able to go visit them in our web browser. So let's just give this a few minutes and then we'll continue. So now we can see that Kibana has finished downloading, and now we can see Elasticsearch almost finished, and now it has finished. It started being pulled, so we can see Kibana is pulled, and now we're just waiting for Elasticsearch to do that, and then it will actually start initializing. I think it will need again a bit more time. So you can see now it's working. It has pulled, the network has been created, and now basically they are attaching Elasticsearch to Kibana, and we can see right now it's actually running. And let's see, Kibana is now running, and Let's give it a bit more time. Now we can see here also Elasticsearch, which stands for ELS, is also running. So now we can see that both services are actually running, and we can actually utilize them and refer to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my web browser, and I'm going to first visit the Elasticsearch node, which is going to be on port 9200. So now if I go back to my web browser here, I'm going to go to localhost 9200. Let's give it a bit more time for it to actually initialize, and let's visit again. And now we can see here that my Elasticsearch container is actually up and running, and we can see that it's utilizing the Docker cluster because it's running locally on my Docker machine. We can see it's using the version that I have specified, and everything is actually running as it should be. So now if I go back to Rider and I check my Kibana, which is going to be on port 5601. So again, I'm going to go back to my web browser, go to localhost and visit that port, and now we can see through this interface I'm able to actually interact with my Elasticsearch cluster. So now it's just going to take a few seconds to initialize, and now we can see here that's actually running as it should be. Okay, perfect. So now that I know both Elasticsearch and Kibana is up and running, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Rider and actually start implementing the integration between Elasticsearch and Kibana. So first things first, I want to install a new package. So I'm going to open a new terminal here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put .NET add package elastic.clients.elasticsearch, and this is a relatively new package for Elasticsearch. Previously we had to use NAST and different ones, but now this package should allow us to directly connect it using a single package rather than two. So now this has been installed successfully. To verify this, we can go to CS Proj, and we can see here that I have my Elasticsearch installed. Perfect. And we can see also it's matching the same version of Elasticsearch. So here we can see it's version 8.15.2. If we go to Docker Compose, we can see here it's also 8.15. So it's also matching the same version of Elasticsearch, which is great. So now that this is ready, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new directory, and I'm going to call this services. Actually, let's add the model first, which is going to be the representation of what we're going to be storing inside our Elasticsearch. So I'm going to put models, and what I'm going to do here is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to have somewhere to store my users. So I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call this my users or users, and it's going to be pretty straightforward. This class will contain an ID, make it good. Actually, let's make it int for simplicity's sake now. And here we're going to put the type as ID. I'm going to put another one. It's going to be of type string. I'm going to put first name, and the last one, which is going to be the last name. So prop string, and it's going to be last name. Okay, perfect. So now I have my user, I have my ID. So this is what I'm going to be storing inside my Elasticsearch index. So now that I have this, the next step is I'm going to start adding a new directory, and this directory is going to be called services. And this is here where I'm going to be defining my Elasticsearch services. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new interface, and I'm going to call this Elasticservice, and I'm going to create another class, and this needs to be an interface, not a class, which is going to implement this. So we're going to put here Elasticservice, and the Elasticservice will actually implement the Elastic interface. Perfect. So now let's populate my Elasticservice. So we're going to first start by actually the functionality to create an index. We're going to be using default indexes, but it's always good to see how we can do that. So to do that, we're going to put task create index that doesn't exist, and this is we're going to be passing the index name. So this is going to be the first item. The second one is going to be for adding or updating. So we're going to say here to add or update user. So we're going to put task bool. We're going to say add or update, and we're going to basically here pass the user that we want to do that to. So we're going to put user. I'm just going to fix this reference. Okay, perfect. The next one is going to be bulk. If you want to do that, we can see it. We can put add or update user bulk, and here it's going to be also pretty straightforward. Task add or update bulk. We're going to take the list of users and the index name that we want to utilize, which is going to be most probably the default one, but we can change it later. Now let's see how we can get a user. So we're going to say here get user, and it's going to be task user get by key, and this is how are we going to be referring to that user once we want to get it. And now let's see how we can get all users, and we're going to put task going to be a list of users, and we're going to return all users. We're going to make it called it get all. Now what we want to do is we want to do the remove. So here we're gonna basically remove the user, we're gonna be returning boolean, and we're gonna take the key to remove, and we're gonna do the remove all, which is gonna also return a task with long, and this here long is gonna basically allow us to see if the execution has been successful, and we're gonna say it's gonna be a remove all. So this is the interface that we want to actually implement, and we can see here we have the basic CRUD operation available. I'm gonna go back to my Elasticsearch and I'm gonna click on implement missing members. I'm gonna implement them all, and now we can see I have full implementation without actually being implemented. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by the create index. But before I do that, I need to create a constructor and inject certain items to it. So in order for me to utilize Elasticsearch here, what I need to do is I need to actually have an instance of my Elasticsearch. So I'm going to put private read only Elasticsearch client, and I'm going to call it client. And what I want also the ability to get my Elasticsearch configuration. So I'm going to put reference to Elastic settings, which I have not created, which is going to provide me with all of the settings that are available. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new folder. I'm going to call it configurations. And inside my configuration folder, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new class, and it's going to called Elastic settings. And this Elastic settings will contain basically the connection string, if there's any credentials, a default index, whatever I might need in order for me to configure Elasticsearch. So first of all, we're going to have a string for the URL, which is going to be the address of my Elasticsearch node. Then we're going to define the index. So I'm going to say here string, this is going to be my default index if I want to utilize my default index or I want to override it. But for now, we're going to use default index. And if I'm actually using some kind of a authentication, I can pass my username as well as I can pass my password. And this will basically allow me to inject them directly into my Elasticsearch client in order for me to utilize it. So now I don't have this set up in my program. We're going to get to that later. But for now, what I can do, if I go back to my Elasticsearch, I can add a reference for this. And now I can basically start utilizing it here in order for me to initialize my client. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my constructor, and basically I want to actually start configuring this. So what I want to do here is I'm going to specify my I options, and this basically allow me to connect to my DI container in order for me to pass the configuration that I passed there. And I'm just going to be for Elastic settings, and I'm just going to call it option monitors. So now what I want to do is, first of all, for my Elastic settings, it's going to be equal to options monitor.value. And this is basically, it will pass all of those different configurations that we have. We did not set it up in program.cs. We will do it in a bit. So now let's start configuring first my Elastic settings, and then I'll create my client. So I'm going to put for settings equal new Elasticsearch client settings. And here what I'm going to do first is I'm going to specify my URL. So I'm going to put a new URI, and I'm going to pass my Elastic settings from my Elastic settings.url. Then if I'm actually adding any types of authorization, I can put authentication here, and I can pass my username and a password, but I don't have this right now, so I'm just going to ignore it. I just wanted to show you that this is where you add it. I'm going to comment this out if you want to use it later. And if I want to add my default index, I can just directly here, I can put default index, again, use my Elastic settings .default index, and this is how I can actually use it from here. So now that I have defined my settings, now all I need to do is just put a client equal a new Elasticsearch client and pass the settings. As simple as that. With that, I can actually have a full-fledged Elasticsearch client that's going to connect to my node and do whatever it needs to do there. So now that I have created this, the first thing that I want to do here is now actually add the functionality to create an index. So I'm going to make this a, and this is going to be pretty straightforward. So I'm going to put if not true, which is going to be client indices.exists. So we're saying if it does not exist, and here I'm going to pass the index name. I'm going to put index name, and I'm going to put .exists. So if it doesn't, what I need to do is I'm going to create it. So I'm going to put client indices.create async, and we don't need that. I'm going to pass here my index name, and I'm going to make this as an await, and that way I can actually check it out. And let's make this exist async, and I'm going to make this also as a asynchronous requests. Actually, just to make it concise, let's keep it as is, and then we can change it later if we need it. Okay, so as simple as that, what we have done here is we have went to the client, told it to go to the indexes, check if this index exists. If it does exist, if it does not exist, we're basically creating a new index. So as simple as that for this one. Now let's see how we can actually add and update item to our indices. Again, pretty straightforward. First thing, we want to make this as an asynchronous. So we're going to put var response equal, we're gonna go to the client and we're gonna say index async, and we're gonna take the user and we're gonna pass the configuration where we're gonna say which index it now has to go look into. And let's put this on a new line. We're gonna say index is index. We're gonna say it has to go to the default index, and then we're gonna say of type index. So this is gonna be the ability to add an item to our index. I'm just gonna make this as an await. And now once we have done that, all I need to do is I'm gonna return back a response dot is valid response, and which means that this item has been indexed correctly into the indices. So if it has, we'll get a valid response. If not, we're gonna get an invalid response. So here again, we just passed the object that we want to index, add or update, and we have passed the configuration items where we specify to which index. Maybe we have multiple indexes inside our Elasticsearch, and we have specified what types of index it is. So here we just say it's gonna be a default index. So this is gonna be for the add update. It's gonna be almost the same thing for the bulk one. So first of all, we're gonna make this as an async again, and I'm gonna be deleting this. We're gonna put our response equal await client bulk async. We don't need this. And here I want to specify the list, which is going to be users. And here what I need to do is I need to specify the configuration based on what is going to be updating. So first of all, I specify that it has to use the default index, which we have already specified. And then we're basically telling it that it needs to update many. So it's going to be users. And we're going to say that it needs to refer to it. Let's make this on a new line. So we can see here, it's going to take the users. And then we're telling that for each user, it needs to check the document, and then we're gonna upsert it. So if it's not doesn't exist, it's gonna add it. If it does exist, it's gonna update it. And now all I'm gonna do is gonna put return response dot is valid response. So with this, I'm almost halfway there. I have added the update and update bulk. Now we have the get all, remove and remove all, which is pretty straightforward to implement. So let's make all of them async, and it will save us a bit of time. So let's just copy paste, and that way we're just trying to be more time efficient. So now for the get, also it needs to be pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna put var response equal await client dot get async, and here we're gonna pass the key that we want to search through. So we're gonna put key, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna specify the configuration, telling it to which index it needs to look, and I'm just gonna tell it needs to go like in the default index. We can see this is the default configuration, and now what I'm gonna do is return the response that I get. I need to put the dot source. Perfect. And here what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are converting it from a list into user. So we need to update it here. Okay, perfect. So now we need to do the get all. Again, I'm gonna remove this default implementation, and I'm gonna put var response equal search async. But what I'm gonna do here, see, Copilot will try to auto-complete it for you, but that's not always the case. So basically instead of getting get, what we're doing is doing search, and we're getting search for all users, and we're telling it that we need to do it through the default index. So what I have here is I have my response we're trying to create, but as you can see here, it is a list of users, not documents. So one way to do it is we can put dot to list, and this basically will convert the response that we have got into a list. So this is one way of doing it. Another way is we can check if this list is empty or not. So we can put response dot is valid response. So if it is a valid response, we return it. Else what we can do is we can return empty list, or we can return default. And here what we let us know is we need to make sure that this is nullable. So let's do this here as well. And now this should be able to make it a better way to return this information. So now for the remove, it's also going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to put var response equal await underscore client dot delete async. And we're going to say it's going to be of type user, and I'm going to specify the key, and almost similar to what we have done before, I'm going to specify the index that it's going to utilize, and we're going to say it's going to utilize my default index. Okay, perfect. And what I'm going to do is going to put return response.isValid response, and that should be it for the remove. And the last item we're going to have is the remove all. Again, we're going to remove this. So we're going to put var response equal await client dot delete by query async, and here we're going to say it's going to be of type user. We don't have anything except we need to specify the index. I'm just going to put the dot index, and we're going to say we're going to use the default one, which is going to be coming from Elasticsearch. settings.default index, and that should be it. Let's put a semicolon here, and here what we can do, we can check it's a valid response, we return deleted, else we return the default implementation. Okay, perfect. So now what we have done is we have created the services and we have created the implementation for it. Now what we want to do is we want to go to program.ci and we want to start injecting this here. So first of all, I want to actually inject my service. So I'm gonna put builder.services.add singleton, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass it here. I'm gonna put here the Elasticsearch. I'm gonna put here Elasticsearch, and this allows me to utilize this inside my DI container. Now that I have configured my Elasticsearch service, now what I need to do is I need to inject my configuration, which we have not added yet. So if we go now to my app settings, I'm gonna add my configuration here, and then I'll inject them directly into my program. So I'm just gonna add a section called Elastic Settings, and within this Elastic Settings, what I have done is I configured my URL, which is my URL based on the Elasticsearch version that I did within the Docker Compose file. My default index is going to be called users. I don't have any username and password. We can leave them empty because I already specified them in the settings. If you want to do authentication, you can pass them through here. So now that my Elasticsearch settings inside my app settings is here, I'm just going to go back to program.ci and I'm going to add it here. So the way I do that is pretty straightforward. I put builder.services.configure, and I'm going to say I want to configure the Elastic settings, and then here I need to specify from where it's going to get them. So it's going to be builder.configuration.get section, and this section is going to be the name of my section inside my app settings, which is going to be Elastic settings, and we're going to put it here. And that should be it for actually initializing it and using it inside my application. Pretty straightforward. So the last one item that I need is I'm going to create a new controller. I'm going to call it users controller, and what I'm going to do here is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to create a controller so I can consume this service. So I'm just going to copy all of this from here instead of me having to retype them all again. And I'm going to inherit from the same base class and use the same logger mechanism just so I can save myself a bit of time. So let's update the constructor, delete this, we don't need it. And let's update the logger name. Perfect. So now what I have here is I have a controller ready for me to utilize it. So here inside my controller, I'm going to have a few endpoints. The first one is going to be HTTP post. I'm going to call it create index, and it's going to be a public async task action result. And let's use this. So we can see here I have create index, and we're going to take the index name. Now what I need to do, which I forgot to do, which is inject my Elastic service. So let's do this right now. I'm going to put private read only Elastic service. I'm going to call it underscore Elastic service, and I'm going to inject this into my constructor. Oops. So we're going to put here again Elastic service, and we're going to put underscore Elastic service equal Elastic service. Perfect. So now what I have here is pretty straightforward. I have my create index, and I have here the ability to utilize it. So Elasticsearch service to create index doesn't exist. Perfect. The other item here that I want is to add a document. So again, HTTP post. Again, it's going to be add user. Again, public, copy paste it actually. Public async task action result. I'm gonna say add user. It's gonna take a from body user. Let's fix this references. Great. So I'm gonna put var result equal underscore Elastic service dot add or update, and I'm gonna pass the user, and this is asynchronous, so I'm just gonna put here await. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put var actually return result. If all is fine, I'm gonna return okay, user has been agreed successfully, as something went wrong. Similarly for update user, because we're using the same functionality, so instead of add users, we're going to call it update user and update user. Now let's see how we can actually get a user. So we're going to put HTTP get, and this is going to be get user. And here we're going to basically see on the key, which is going to be searching through. Again, public async task action result. And we're going to say here get user. Pretty straightforward. We're passing the key. We're using the Elasticsearch service with a get. And if it's null, it's not null, we're returning okay. If it is, we're returning not found. And the last item, so we just make sure that we are saving a bit of time. Actually, let's do the get all and we'll do the delete. So for the get all, we're going to be pretty straightforward. Public async task action result. We're going to say get all users. We're not going to pass anything to it. Going to put var users equal await and Elasticsearch get all, and for the return we're gonna put users not equal to null, we'll return it as an okay, else we'll return an error. And lastly, let's do the delete. So we're gonna put http delete, and here we're gonna delete the user per the key, and again public a task I action result delete user based on key. As we can see here, we're using the remove which we have created based on the key, and if it's successful, we're returning user deleted. If not, we're returning an error. So now let's run this, and let's go to my web browser, and I'm gonna open it here. Maybe it's still loading. Let's check. Let's put /index.html, and now we can see it loaded, and we can see here that I have my different action items. So now for creating indexes, if we go back to my source code and check what did I call my default index, we can see it's users. So if I copy here and add it, click on execute, we should be able to get a 200 now, and we can see that the user has been created. If I go to Elasticsearch, I'm just gonna skip through this, and now here what I can do, I can just look for index, and we can see under data we have index management, and now once we go to it, we can see here that my user's index is available for me. Perfect. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this user index and start now by adding a user. Try it out. I'm gonna give it the ID 1, and I'm gonna put first name is Mohamad, last name is Lawand, and click on execute, and we got basically here 200. If I go back here and I refresh this, so again index management, we can see now the storage has increased to 5.6k because it has been created. I'm just gonna add another one here. I'm gonna put 2, Mohammed 2 and Lawand 2, execute. If we come here, let's refresh this again, and now okay, we're still the same, but I know for sure that has been added. Now what we can do is we can continue utilizing this. So now for post, let's update this user. So now for ID 1, I'm gonna put T, and then here I'm gonna put L, and then I'm gonna put execute, and now we can see here this has been updated. If I want to get user by key, again come here, specify the key, which is gonna say, let's say 1, execute, and we can see here that I got my index, which is Muhammad Talal, and we here have my last name Lawand. So now this has been retrieved. Get all users. Now I should be able to get my 2 users that I've just created, and we can see here that I have MT and Muhammad 2 and Lawand 2. Perfect. And if I want to delete user by key, if I want to delete the second one, click on execute. We got it has been deleted, and if I do get all, now I should be able to see a single user, which is MT. Perfect. So this has been a very quick demonstration of our application, and basically we have seen how easy it is for us to actually create a Elasticsearch node locally on our machine so we can utilize it, and how we can actually create a default implementation or default service within our .NET Web API to utilize it. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. It will really help the channel. As well, if you'd like to have access to the source code, make sure you're supporting me on Patreon or buying me a coffee. With that, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.